She was the lieutenant governor.
She was lieutenant governor, and we had anticipated that Mrs. G was simply going to step down, and we were going to give her a huge party and a wonderful send-off. And Mr. G determined that no, Martha should stay as long as Blanchard. And
Hicks Griffiths.
Hicks Griffiths.
One-time chairman of the Michigan Democratic
And a
Party.
very ferocious, important thinker and a really great man. But you know, the truth of the matter is we had a plan. Our plan was to change the face of the governor by introducing as his lieutenant governor Bob Bowman. That was going to be our big shift toward youth, toward vigor, toward new ideas. When that didn't happen, we stumbled. We stumbled pretty badly. And then the Republicans, through some operatives of theirs based in Detroit, were able to convince the mayor to kind of sit on his hands. Not a lot, but the mayor didn't bring the kind of enthusiasm to Blanchard's reelection as we needed. We ended up, as you know, losing that election by 17,000 votes, less than 1 vote per precinct, and clearly all of that turnout could have come from the city of Detroit. I don't blame the mayor completely. It was a poorly run campaign. I won't name the names of the people because they're still stumbling around here trying to do political work now. They ain't good at it now. They weren't good at it then. And we were very profoundly disappointed. On the Supreme Court then was Justice Dennis W. Archer Sr. Having witnessed the confusion that occurred when Blair Moody
back in '76.
So
yeah.
Dennis then, when Blanchard lost, immediately resigned from the court so that Blanchard would have a clear window within which to make the appointment when he was absolutely, unequivocally still the governor. So, man, you know, I mean, there was furious jockeying, and I remember the phone call from my father.
This is in December of 1990.
This is November.
November of 1990.
November of
Right
1990, right after the election.
Okay.
You know, Dennis resigns, and
because he's getting ready to run for mayor.
Getting ready to run for mayor, and he wanted to be sure that Blanchard, as the governor, had an unquestioned ability to appoint his replacement.
Right.
So he exits. There's a vacancy. The jockeying begins.
Who were some of the other people being considered, do you think, at that
Most
time?
directly being considered. Remember, there was a list of names that were appointed. I was on it. A brilliant jurist by the name of Cynthia Stevens was on it. Adam Shakur, who was then, I think, the deputy mayor for the city of Detroit, but had been the chief judge of the 36th District Court, was on it. And Ernie Lofton, who was the regional director 1A for the UAW, very powerful, and Coleman Young were supporting Adam Shakur. My name was on the published list, and my father said, you know what, it's a great thing. And I agreed. There was a great thing to be mentioned as a possible candidate for the court. And Bill, I swear on a stack of Bibles, I thought nothing more about it. It's good to have my name on the list. Thank you, Governor, for thinking about me. I was moving on. I mean, not moving on. I wasn't paying any attention. You know, Christmas was coming, and I had things to do. I wasn't paying any attention.
You were practicing law. Everything
to this
was going
at all.
well.
And the governor, I know now and did not know then, was furious with everyone. He thought that the people who were closest to him institutionally could have done more. The UAW could have done more.
In his reelection
In
campaign.
his reelection.
Yeah.
The UAW could have done more. The mayor of Detroit could have done more. And whether he was right or not, he was feeling like people that he had helped, people that he had protected, people that he had supported, had not given him the support that he deserved. So there was a gap that existed between now the people who were supporting Adam and what the governor himself was interested in doing. And as both Ron Thayer and Tom LeWan tell the story, they were sitting with the governor, and the governor was saying, man, oh man, I really am betwixt and in between. Adam is perfectly a good choice. He's qualified, good guy, I know him, I like him, but I don't want to do it. And Ron Thayer and Lujan say to him, well, what do you want to do? He said, what I really want to do is appoint Conrad. And Lujan says, well, you know what? You ought to do what you want to do. And Thayer says, I've been saying that to you all day long. You ought to do what you want to do. And the next thing I know, completely out of the blue, I get a phone call from the governor that says, I'm going to appoint you to the court.
Where were you at that time?
I was at home. I was living in West Bloomfield. Got the phone call. I'm sure it was a weekend. I can't remember, Bill, if it was a Saturday night or a Sunday night. Whatever it was, we both knew that the story could not be held. So we went to Stephen Cooper's court, I think that following Tuesday, so it had to be a Sunday, following Tuesday for the announcement at 10 o'clock. And we made the announcement. The governor then gathered up his family, went to Washington, kind of halfway done at that point, kept his address in Michigan, but gathered up his team, and he left to Washington, and everybody associated with the Blanchard campaign kind of flew to the four winds. And, you know, I'm standing there now as a member of the Michigan Supreme Court. And both my father and Jim Blanchard say to me, this 2 years on the court will be great for you. It will solidify your career. It'll be a great thing. And
Why 2 years?
because neither one of them thought I could get elected.
And you had to run for election to fill out the unexpired portion of the term of Archer.
Right.
In 1992.
And
they thought you weren't going to be able to be elected in your own right. Well, let me ask you this. Why did they have that kind of reaction? What was the reaction in your mind to your being appointed by Blanchard to the court at that point?
Unanimously negative. Every newspaper in the state.
On what grounds?
That I had never been a trial court lawyer, that I had never been a judge, and that I was too young. All true. The Detroit News called me Blanchard's Revenge. I mean,
well, what did that do to you personally?
You know what? It was a great and profound moment because when I was on the phone with Rick Weiner, and Rick called me up and said, listen, you know, I see all these editorials, and he said, but remember this, next week they'll be on to something else.
Sage advice.
And he said, so I'm not saying forget about it. I'm saying understand that they'll be on to something else. You'll be fine. So the next week, New Year's Eve, they were on to something else. And then the thing that I don't think that either the governor or my father really appreciated was that although I had never been elected, I knew what I was doing. My swearing-in ceremony was at the DIA. I had Carl Marlinga, Stan Steinborn, Frank Kelly, Damon Keith, Coleman Young, the prosecutor from Genesee County.
Weiss?
Weiss,
Yep.
Bob Weiss.
Yep.
I had the president of the state bar. My cousin Leslie was the president of the Wolverine bar. I had Wendy Baxter, who was the chief judge of the Recorder's Division of the Wayne County Circuit Court. These people were all on the stage, and there were 1,100 people at the swearing-in ceremony. And Hugh McDermott, who was your good friend,
Yep.
and a political writer, a columnist for the Free Press, came and wrote about it and said, don't count this kid out. There's 1,100 people there on a day when it was a terrific ice storm and people really had to labor to get there. He said 1,100 people, there was standing room only. All of these people were there. He says, you know what? I'm not a fan or a supporter. All I'm telling you is don't count this kid out. And that was his column, and that was the start. And from that point, from the swearing-in ceremony until the date of the election, I averaged one campaign appearance a day.
Somewhere in the state.
Somewhere in the state. The next month, in February, I flew to the Upper Peninsula. I was there for a week. And as you know, you only get credit for going to the Upper Peninsula in the winter. They don't care if you come in the summer. That's when
Right.
everybody
Yeah,
comes. You got to
exactly.
come when there's 23 inches of snow on the ground and the high that day is 10 below. Then they will say, we're glad to see you.
Right.
So I went to northern Michigan and did 2 days of a teach-in kind of thing as a guest lecturer because, you know, I was notorious. I was, you know, this brand new 37-year-old member of the Michigan Supreme Court, and people wanted to see, you know, does he speak in complete sentences? and so I had a ball, and I campaigned on my desk on the which we cleared for this interview. There's a picture of me and my then 3-year-old, you know, at a campaign event. She's got on a pair of sunglasses, and I'm lecturing away, campaigning my brains out. And that's what I did. It was a family job. That's what we did for entertainment for 2 years. And you remember, Bill, surprisingly, against Michael Talbot,
Right.
a
Okay,
judge of
before we
profound.
get to that, you're a member of the court.
Yes.
You walk in there and you've got titans
Yes.
surrounding
No
you.
question,
You've
no
got
question.
Charles Levin, you've got Bob Griffin, Jim Brickley,
Patty
Dorothy
Boyle.
Comstock Riley, Patricia Boyle,
Mike Kavanaugh.
Mike Kavanaugh. Those were your colleagues.
Those are my colleagues.
How did they treat you?
Dorothy Riley, next to my mother, is probably the most important woman in my life. Dorothy, when I got appointed, said, I've only met Conrad once, but he certainly seemed to me to be a nice young man. I mean, and so she gave me as much of a positive endorsement as she could. She was always gentle, she was always graceful, and she was always supportive. My office in the Detroit office that we had was next to hers, and I would sit with Dorothy 2 or 3 hours a week, you know, half an hour here, 45 minutes there, every day. She was just a really, really, really important member. Senator Griffin, a very senior member of the court, long career in the Senate. When I walked in, he said, listen, you'll be all right. Never forget your primary responsibility, your sole responsibility is to protect the institution of the court in the things you write and in the way you behave. You never forget that, you'll be fine. Brickley, who had his own complicated career, was just, you know, I'm glad you're here, this will be a lot of fun. Kavanaugh knew my father when my father was, you know, going to get Mike out of trouble that he had gotten himself into when his older brother, Jerry, was the mayor.
Right.
So Kavanaugh said, listen, whatever I can do, you let me know. You know, I owe your father a tremendous debt that I've never been able to pay, and so I'm going to do everything I can to take care of you. Chuck Levin thought I was hysterical.
In what way?
In that I was just so junior but so opinionated, you know, and Boyle was interested in the fact that 90% of the time, and with criminal law matters, I agree with her and not Chuck.